Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of Ask Professor Paranormal. Uh, it's good to be back. It's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you folks, answering questions, talking about topics you might be interested in as well. And I hope you can be a little more interactive, to especially get started. You know, it's always tough to kind of get started with these things. So one of the things I thought about doing, and hi Tina, you're in Hawaii. That's great. That's cool. Um, I, for years, many years, I've been using something that kind of a tool, a list, um, to help media people come up with questions for me, but also I've used it in other ways. In fact, it used to be my article generator when I was writing a column for Fate magazine. And so I thought I'd share that with you now. I'm going to share it again later in the episode tonight. And it's something that, in fact, people can send an email for me. So you can see it now on the side. It may be a little small, but it's a topics list of all sorts of topics to talk about, to ask. It is available if you just email askprofparanormal@gmail.com. Happy to send it to you. It'll help you if you're thinking about paranormal, parapsychological topics. So that's the first page. Here's the second page. I've come up with a lot of different topics, and some of them are similar, but it's a way of actually thinking about questions to ask me, to ask other parapsychologists, to ask other paranormal enthusiasts, things like that. And let me just say hello to Day, and looks like we have somebody in Costa Rica. Hi there, and from Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Great, good to see you there. So remember that for those of you who've been here before, this is an opportunity to ask me questions about parapsychology, about psychic phenomena, about the paranormal. And I'm happy to provide whatever information I can, tell you some stories if you want to hear a story or two. And hi, Kathy. Good to see you here. But also, if you just want to toss a topic at me, I'll kind of like talk about that a little bit as much as I can. Before we get into that, since I have no questions yet. Oh, here we go. Day is going to Madison Seminary Saturday. How many session interacting with ghosts? Yes. Here's something you should always consider, and I can tell you that this has worked so well for me and the folks that I've worked with over the years, my teammates, people I've trained when we've done investigations. Treat ghosts like people. Ghosts are people too. They may be dead people, but they're still people. And the best way to get a reaction or get interaction with apparitions, with ghosts, is to treat them like people that you meet who you'd like them to like you. In other words, be friendly, be open. You can be a little lighthearted. I'd say, don't make fun of them, but be a little lighthearted is fine. The friendlier you are, you want to get them to like you. You want to get them to want to interact with you, to provide you with things. And we've had a lot of phenomena happen over the years in some of our cases, many of our cases, because of that alone. This idea of yelling at ghosts and stuff to provoking them makes no sense whatsoever. It really doesn't make any sense. So that's my recommendation. Be nice. Be nice to the people you interview who are alive. Uh, put it out there that you just want to be friends to the ghosts, and you'll have a much better time. And if you have some fun or some just kind of a little lighthearted fun as you're doing the investigation, you'll find that you'll probably have some invisible helpers making it a little bit more fun. So hopefully that helps a bit. I thought I'd also, since that was a great question, uh, I have a couple courses coming up. I just want to mention that the Rhine Education Center and in the about my page, you'll find links to the Rhine Education Center in on that page. The Rhine Education Center is starting a set of 4-week classes in August. They're starting the week of the 7th of August. And I'm teaching classes. A couple of other folks are teaching courses as well. There's one in out-of-body experience. There's a number of other classes. They're short classes. A couple of them are part of our certificate programs if you want to do that. Others are just for fun. And you can always just take them for fun. They're online classes. And I am teaching or co-teaching 2 classes. I'm teaching one called Development of Investigative Techniques. So if you're a ghost hunter or somebody who's doing investigations, this course talks about how the techniques and methods have evolved over time and what has not changed since the very beginning of the Society for Psychical Research in England, which is still in operation. That started in 1882, and a little bit about the Ghost Club, the London Ghost Club, which started even earlier than that, still in operation, but really is not a scientific organization at all. So we'll talk about the investigative techniques and how they change. It's really how we came to where we are today in general. Okay, Stephen Smith, you're interested in what psychic Victoria Laurie calls the other side. Please give me your views on who is there and how the other side relates to reincarnation in heaven. That's a good question. You happen to have mentioned one of my favorite mystery authors too, and I've met Victoria. I actually had tried to bring her in on a proposed TV series years ago, which the network decided to go against the original request, which was to have a new and unique take on ghost hunting. Victoria was going to be involved in that, um, and actually, they just went with a ghost hunting show as normal. Anyway, I know of her psychic ability. She is a very talented psychic and medium. I highly recommend her novels, especially her Psychic Eye series. So a lot of mediums, and for many, many years, people have often called the place, it can't even call it place, the existence somebody has after they die when they leave what many psychics call the earth plane or leave here. It could be another dimension. It could be something else. We don't really have words to describe what it is. Um, it it is not really heaven the way certainly the Bible or biblical stuff or religious stuff talks about it. It's a very non-religious specific place, if you want to call it a place at all, a world or existence. And it is seemingly, according to many mediums I've worked with and others, it is timeless, meaning it's outside of our time and space. And because it's outside of our time and space, technically, someone, and this gets very confusing, someone could be communicating with a medium from the other side and also be reincarnated at the same time here on Earth, here in our world. Because again, it's outside of time and space. I think you have to be a science fiction reader or a comic book reader to kind of grasp some of that. Um, but whether it's heaven, every medium I've ever talked to, and I haven't had talked to Victoria about this, uh, the other side is not really based on good and evil. It's not based on that. Most of the mediums we work with for the Forever Family Foundation will say that here's what happens when you die and move on. You kind of get confronted with everything good or bad you've ever done. So you have to face yourself, basically. It's kind of like the movie Defending Your Life, except there's no movie involved. That if you've ever seen Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks. And for some people, having to face the things you've done in your life could be hell. For many people, it may be very neutral or accepting. So it can vary quite a bit for people. Then there's the idea that what that existence is like after you get past that stage is based on your expectation. It's based on your belief system. That's really hard to know. Um, Mediums describe a very pleasant world with very similar structures like homes and people and all of that. But they also tell us that they can only describe things in terms that even they understand. So if that existence on the other side, which is non-physical, you don't have a physical body, if that existence is so different from the concepts and ideas that we have as living people, there's no language to describe it. So it's just more different than people can describe. So it is described in ways we can understand. That's usually what I get from the mediums themselves. But some people call it heaven. Some people call it just simply the afterlife or just the other side. But doesn't seem to pertain to what religion is. All right, Kathy's asking, what does it mean, thinning of the veil? I hear a lot of psychics mentioning this. Well, this is a little bit of folklore that the separation between our world and existence and the spirit world at some times of year, it's easier for them to come through. It's easier for them to appear to people again. That doesn't seem to hold true if you look at experiences of people, just average people, in having after death communication from people who've moved on to the other side, as well as psychics and mediums and practitioners of all sorts all over the world. But it does seem that our beliefs may affect what we look for and try to make contact with. So for some people, if you believe that the veil is thinnest after Halloween, just basically after All Hallows Eve, which is the night before that time. It may be that your belief actually allows you to communicate the next day after Halloween, where otherwise it wouldn't. You wouldn't notice anything at that point. So, I mean, there's a lot of language that psychics use and mediums use, and a lot of it comes from other psychics and mediums over time. It comes from folklore. It sometimes comes from pop culture. Sometimes it comes from movies. There's a number of things that kind of come up. I'll give you an example of folklore that pop culture folklore that has become accepted, and that is the idea that ghost hunters often talk about looking for temperature changes. It's going to you're looking for cold spots. And while people may feel cold on occasion in ghostly encounters, if you actually measure the temperature, there is no temperature difference in most of the instances. There are sometimes the temperature does change. It may drop without being cold. Um, I can think of a case that I was involved in where the temperature dropped from 97 degrees in the room to 75. That was a nice cool spot, not a cold spot. But the room next to it went up to 110 degrees. So there was a hot spot also. In most cases, we feel cold when we get kind of that shiver, that weird sensation of presence, not a physical cold spot. But Hollywood has used that idea on the screen to show that there's something ghostly or supernatural about to happen. That's been going on since the early days of cinema, in fact, showing the cold breath and the darkening of the room and the spooky music. All of that kind of helps. So that really is more of a pop culture bit of folklore and a misinterpretation of what people were experiencing than anything else. All right, so let me talk a little bit more about the other course I'm teaching. So again, I'm teaching Development of Investigative Techniques, 4-week class. This fall, by the way, I will be teaching starting in October a course looking at some famous, well-investigated cases, including many of my own. That's an 8-week class for the Rhine Center. And the other class that I'm teaching or co-teaching is on ethics for field investigators. So if you're a ghost hunter, we discuss ethical issues and how to deal with clients and best ways to protect yourself and your clients from any problems down the road or in that moment as well. And those are through the Rhine Education Center. Again, it is an online course. All the courses are online. You'll be able to see them. All right, so Danya, Ben, who's the spirit that Danya communicates with, talks about this place where all the infinite possibilities happen at once, where we go after we die. And I think it's a good way to put it. Maybe that's better than calling it the other side. And by the way, the other side refers to that veil, that separation between the physical world and the spirit world. So I always like to say the other side of what, you know. So that it's a little bit difficult. I think timeless, spaceless place, if it's even a place, if you can call it that, or dimension might make sense. All right, Stephen, are ghosts the spirits that don't make it to the other side who get stuck in our world after death? Now, most mediums will make a distinction between using the word ghost and the word spirit. Spirit referring to people on the other side who have transitioned. And they will use the word ghost for people who have not yet transitioned. We tend to use the word apparition uh, for the ones who are here, who haven't moved on at that point. We're not communicating through a medium. And whether they're stuck, there's all sorts of ideas about what that means. It seems, if you really look at the communications psychics, mediums, witnesses have had over the last 140 years with the ghosts, with the apparitions who are still here, when they have communication, it seems that the individuals who are ghosts have decided to stay, or they're in now that they're dead, or they might have the interest of making sure that their family, the people they've left behind, are okay. In other words, they're here for us in many respects. From some of the communications I've read and heard through mediums and witnesses and psychics, sometimes they don't know where the light is. This is the weirdest one. People saying, the ghost saying, "Well, I didn't see the light," which is more of a thing from the movies than anything else. And the psychics and medium will just help them move on, tell them to stop looking for the light and just simply let go of here. There are those who have psychological attachments to their possessions, to their homes, and things like that. So there's a range of reasons, and all the reasons are human reasons why they have stuck themselves. There's no greater system that's keeping them stuck, it doesn't seem. All right, graveyard grog. Part of you always felt that dreams are a form of what the other side is. That makes sense. Perhaps once we pass on, perhaps our consciousness lives on in that dream world. That makes sense. That kind of fits with the idea that some mediums say that on the other side we make our own heaven or hell. So we punish ourselves or we live what we like. If you have not seen this movie, I highly recommend it. The book is even better. It's called What Dreams May Come. It's starring Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. And when people die, they basically create their own afterlife based on their beliefs and expectations. And that book, the book that it's based on, What Dreams May Come, is by Richard Matheson, who was one of the most knowledgeable fiction writers about the paranormal, about psychic phenomena, about parapsychology. So I highly recommend his book. I highly recommend that movie also for this concept. Paul, and hi, Paul. Any thoughts on Wednesday's UFO UAP hearings? I honestly, I'd just gotten back from a trip like late the night before, so I completely missed that. I haven't even caught up on what's been going on in that world at this point. So was that last Wednesday or upcoming Wednesday? The hearings that are coming up. So I'm not quite sure where we are. As you remember, Paul, you've heard this from me before. I'm mildly interested in UFOs, but I don't really follow that much. Okay, since there isn't time on the other side, can a medium connect with one or more of your past lives simultaneously? That's a good question. The mediums I've talked to have never said anything about that. And honestly, the question is whether there's several questions here. One, have we all had past lives? That's number one. We don't have any real scientific indication that that's the case. Second question is if we're on the other side and we're whoever we are at this point, are we an amalgam? If we've had many past lives, do we become an amalgam of all those past lives? Is there something else going on? We really don't know much about that. For the past life thing, we in parapsychology stick mainly with children who remember previous lives because they are not contaminated by all the other stuff that they might have been exposed to during growing up in the world today. So it's a little tough. I know that there are psychics and mediums who do past life readings, especially psychics who do past life readings. I don't put a lot of stock in those, honestly. I had a medium tell me something about a past life I had, which may have been something, but frankly, it sounded more like a description of a pirate movie, which I'm a big fan of. And maybe I was a pirate in past life, but the activity and everything else that was going on was more of a Hollywood thing than it certainly could have been a real historical pirate thing. So I can't tell you how much we put stock. We don't really put stock in that. It's first of all, it's even if the psychic picked up factual information, it's hard to say that it related to the person they're doing the reading for. The person would have to have had those experiences or those memories before themselves. All right. So just to let you know, for those of you who are new to this, there's a wide range of topics that parapsychology covers that are outside what has become known as the paranormal. Who say you were as a pirate? Nobody famous. I was a pirate captain. She didn't give me a name. Apparently, I was a pirate captain, and of course, more of a privateer than anything else. But funny thing is that this is something my friend Kerry Gaynor, who's an investigator and parapsychologist himself, years ago we talked about this. Kerry is a hypnotherapist by profession, and he actually does past life therapy, which is very useful. And we both kidded about the fact when I told Kerry about this. He said, well, he loves pirate movies too, so maybe we're pirates together in a past life. You know, I love the old Captain Blood movies. That's all I can say. Anyway, I was going to say that parapsychology covers a wide range of topics beyond the so-called paranormal that they talk about on TV. Um, and we study and look at people's ESP experiences, which include precognition, like picking up information about the future. It includes clairvoyance or real-time ESP, um, which could be local or it could be remote. That's where remote viewing comes from. It could be just telepathic stuff as well. I'll switch over to this question here. Brian's asking, my son wants to know what you think about using those light up pet toy balls you can use to communicate with spirits. They do not, they do not, those are cat toys. They're cat toys. Somebody bought a bunch of cat toys from the manufacturer wholesale and repackaged them. They're cat toys. That's all they are. So any vibration on the floor in the neighborhood, truck rumbles by, it's going to light up. Any vibration. That's not a good way to try to communicate with spirits at all, because you can't know what's going on with them. And if you move around, you can cause those things to light up as well. If you're on a concrete floor, it's less likely to have a problem, but there's still going to be some other things that affect them. All right. So switching back over to parapsychology. Parapsychology also looks at psychokinesis, or mind-matter interaction, mind over matter. And that's not just moving things, it's affecting energy. It is healing, psychic healing, whether you do it to yourself or somebody else. So energy healing falls under this. Bending spoons with your bare mind might be there. And affecting machinery, equipment. We have a lot of data that human beings can affect computers, which brings in another issue back to those cat toys, those balls, or any equipment that's used. We human beings unconsciously can affect devices. We have a lot of data on that. Usually it's through intention or stress, but that raises a question when you have electronic stuff reacting in an investigation. Could you be affecting the device rather than an actual spirit? If the only thing you know the only thing you have to indicate there's a spirit present is a piece of technology, you cannot say there's a spirit present with any degree of confidence. Besides the fact that most devices will pick up other things, they're not designed. You cannot design a device to communicate or to pick up ghosts because we don't know what we're trying to detect or connect to. If a ghost affects a device, that is still psychokinesis. If a human being who's alive affects it, it's psychokinesis. By the way, if you communicate with a ghost as a medium, you're using ESP. If you see a ghost as a living person, you're using ESP. So when I hear ghost hunter shows completely say that there's nothing parapsychology has to offer, they don't know what they're doing. And it's all TV, really. All right, let's see. Maybe the cats use them to contact spirits. Sometimes I wonder if my cats over the years are affecting technology as well. So, cats and dogs do have some ESP, maybe some PK as well. All right, and Paul, thanks for letting me know. I'll have to look into those hearings. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. Um, Graveyard Grog, maybe a light form of astral projection, perhaps maybe the effect of the device unknowingly. It's simply we unconsciously affect things without even being aware of it. That's especially when we're stressed out. Reiki is considered parapsychology. So, any energy healing technically would fall under psychic healing or psychokinetic ability because you're affecting the physical world, in this case, energy, some form of energetic exchange, or just directly affecting the individual with your mind. So, yeah, that falls under parapsychology. I'm trying to remember. I think there have been studies of Reiki practitioners done by a couple of my colleagues. I know that the Rhine Research Center has a bioenergy lab and working with energy healers of different types in the bioenergy lab as well. So yeah, that's parapsychology. That's psychic. I know that folks may not want to call it psychic. That's kind of what it is. It's anything involving consciousness affecting things directly, technically can fall under our field. All right. And glad to see you have that master's. Okay, Paul, I'm going to have a Zoom meeting with a member of the University of Virginia using perceptual studies this upcoming Thursday. So University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, DOPS, as it's called, I highly recommend, you can see it from the chat here, I highly recommend that you folks look it up. Just type in Division of Perceptual Studies into Google, and that will get you to the DOPS page. They have an enormous amount of information available for free on topics ranging from apparitions to a lot on reincarnation, because UVA, that division, has been doing research on reincarnation with children, especially since 1960. There is an extraordinary amount of information on near-death experiences, on out-of-body experiences. That is one of the best places to go for scientific information and studies on many of these topics involving survival of bodily death. Okay, let's see. What are your thoughts on Akashic records? And some who claim to be able to read them. So, to me, let's use a modern metaphor. The Akashic records is the cloud, and all information gets uploaded to the cloud. So somehow there's an information field, whether it's around us or somewhere else, which mystics have called the Akashic records, that people can pick up information from. But we don't know anything more about that. We can't directly connect with that cloud, with the Akashic records. There are different metaphors for it. Some psychics talk about it as being like a library where they're mentally pulling down a book. Others talked about parchment, papyrus. I've heard that. But I think it's really being able to get information from the information field that is the planet Earth. That's the Akashic field, the Akashic records itself. So it's just different terms for the same kind of thing, I think. When people are having an experience of a haunting, it's a repetitive pattern of something that's happening in their home or in their building, and they either see it or hear it or feel it, and it's going on again and again. That typically relates to something real. If it's a true haunting, it relates to some event or people that were there sometime in the past. Could have been 3 days before, could have been 3 years, could have been 300 years. Information is there that we can sometimes pick up for various reasons. So, and it gets replayed. And the most important thing to know is it's the same with the cloud, is that something living has to impress the information upon that information field. So the Akashic records have nothing to do with the dead. In other words, the information field is about the information that the world puts into it. When you die, maybe your spirit does, but it's hard to say. All right, Paul, enjoyed watching your interview on the Unraveling Universe podcast. That's a really good podcast for those of you that are not familiar. It's about consciousness, and I've had done 2 episodes of Unraveling the Universe, and both have been fun, really good discussions that I've had. You can find just simply Google that, and you'll find access to that podcast. I did talk about spoon bending quite a bit for that, and running spoon bending parties as well. So I will put this out to the 15 or 16 of you who are watching. Again, you can contact me just by emailing. Some of you have my actual email, my other email, but it's just simply askprof, P-R-O-F, paranormal@gmail.com. You can send me that, and I can send you a piece. Just send me an email, say, I want the spoon bending instructions. I am happy to send you something that I've written up on how to run a spoon bending party. Perfectly happy to do that. So, and it's something I hope to get back to doing in person here in the Bay Area yet again. And Tina, for you in Hawaii right now, Lopaka had me do one last time I was there in 2019, and I hope to get back to Honolulu and places to do them again. because I love doing those. They're a lot of fun to do as well. Okay, we're about to just past the halfway mark. So for those of you who are new, this goes for a total of an hour. So it's a 1 hour session that we do, and then I'll be doing another one. Uh, Theoretically, unless something comes up, I'll be doing every other week now, going forward, every other Sunday. So the next one will be the first Sunday in August, the 6th and the 20th, or the next couple of dates. All right. And I know, Tina, you're trying to say something. Let. I'm not quite sure what we're trying to say there. Okay. So let's have a spoon betting party in New York City. Yeah, sure. You have to get me to New York first. At some point, I'll get there again. I was just there for a couple of days, a little over a week ago, just visiting my mom. Didn't have time for much of anything, unfortunately, other than an investigation with a buddy of mine. A quick one, really quick thing, helping some folks out. Um, anyway, one of the things I can do, and I'll just kind of put this out there, Tina, um, is I thank you, Graveyard Grog. That is true that we can all bend some things with our, just be careful on doing anything with a sharp knife. Um, I can help run a spoon bending party virtually as long as the people doing the bending and there's a helper there are live and in person. I have tried at a request of one of my colleagues a couple of years ago during the lockdown. We tried doing he really wanted to do a spoon bending party virtually. Every person was in a different place. Honestly, because there's a specific psychology, uh, a performance that happens when you get a group together. It really needs to have the people in the same room. The most successful people on that virtual call was a guy who had his kids with him, and they were all kind of goofing around, which is the best way to do it. So, Tina, if you want to talk to me at some point, I can certainly lead you through doing one and lead the spoon bending party. But the people who are doing it have got to be in one place to really do that. Yeah, we can talk about that at some point. Also does require a lot of spoons and forks and things like that. So I have some advice on where to get that stuff from too cheaply, because you don't want to spend a ton of money on that. For that. All right. And of course, this is part of studying psychokinesis. It's just it is something that, interestingly enough, psychokinesis is mind over matter. To do that, people ask about actually doing that. There's a psychology to it, and interestingly enough, it's very similar to sports psychology or performance psychology in general. In fact, it fits. Years ago, I had a conversation with one of the people teaching sports psychology at John F. Kennedy University, where used to be on faculty, and we're comparing notes about my running the spoon bending parties and the psychology behind that, developed by Kenneth Batcheldor back in the 60s and 70s. And he was like just amazed at how it was sports psychology. It was performance psychology. So there's really something to this in that sense. All right, Mew or Moo. What do you know about shadow figures? And your friends saw a running shadow figure when we were kids. Both looked at each other immediately, talking about mundane things. There's so much folklore about shadow people, shadow figures. It's really hard to know in an individual instance what you might have experienced with that. I know that in some cases that I've investigated, it's really been interesting because we've had cases where somebody in the family or somebody in the home saw a shadow figure, but somebody else saw the figure more clearly in the same spot, as if there was a signal coming from the figure, the apparition, and the person who saw the shadow didn't quite get that figure in focus or completely. They didn't get the information properly. They couldn't mentally recreate that image, whereas the other person was much more psychic or more open and got it very clearly. So we think that a lot of the shadow figures people see, when they're not tricks of the light, when they're not tricks of your eyes, or due to infrasound, low frequency sound, which affects the eyeball, a lot of times this may be an apparition or even a haunting, a recording of a person but your ability to process, to play it back, isn't giving you the whole picture. Then again, I had a case years ago where this was in a interior design warehouse. It was the warehouse for an interior designer, and we were able to figure out who the guy was. But they were the cleanup crew was experiencing stuff. They had some physical things happening. They had a sense that there was somebody in a loft where they were storing fabric, a lot of Dacron and other fabric and such. They would get a real sense of sadness and like confusion and such, and they thought they actually had a ghost up there. So I had a couple psychics come in, and in fact, they communicated with the guy, who, by the way, the people at the warehouse started calling Dacron Bob, for want of a better name. He was seen as a blobby, shadowy figure when he was seen by people, not even a human figure. And the first psychic, when she's picking it up, she said, "This guy's really depressed. He sees himself as a blot on the face of the earth, like he had no form." We were able to track him back to a jogger who died of a heart attack near the, like, very close to the warehouse. He was actually on a path, trail very close to the warehouse, and he died of a heart attack right there. And apparently didn't move on, but he was really depressed. He didn't know what to do, so he had no sense of self, and we were able to help him move on in that case. Okay, Liz, you've seen them. It's like they're shy, they run away, attract energy. You know, the one thing I will say about shadow figures, the TV shows often make them seem like they're evil because they're shadows. And I will tell you right now that, you know, I would be more concerned about seeing a really, really bright figure, because light can blind you. A shadow is cool, shouldn't hurt you at all in that sense, unless, of course, it's the shadow and you are a criminal, because we all know the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. All right. Stephen, you just got ESP cards from the Rhine. What's the best environment to use them? Sleeper or alert? Just after meditation? Try them in different states. That's all I can tell you. Meditation's a good time. You know, we do know there's a connection between ESP and meditation, that meditative states, any altered state may help you be more psychic. So that would be a good time to do it. But try them in different states for that. Okay, Graveyard Grog. My group rented out Eastern State Penitentiary one night years ago. 4 of us and only 2 employees were on the ground. Saw what looked like to be a figure run between 2 cells. You know, again, with places, historical places especially, there is a lot of information imprinted there. Alcatraz is a great example. That most of the information that you pick up on, that people pick up on in haunted places, especially prisons, is going to be emotional. It's going to be depression, sadness, sometimes like maybe even violence, things like that. Some people pick up figures, but it's about the imprint. It's not about actual conscious entities. And we do have to separate the conscious entities from the recordings. You know, is it live? For those of you old enough, is it live or is it Memorex? Liz is saying your breath is the most important. I guess breathing properly, you know, breathing can help with meditation too as well. Yeah, so the replays, hauntings are things that replay over and over again. People report them over the years the same way, which is always interesting. All right, are shadow figures physically visible? Well, no psychic phenomena, no paranormal phenomena other than physical objects moving are actually visible through to your eyes. All right, so we talk about ghosts, we talk about hauntings, we talk about shadow figures, any of that stuff. That is all you using your ESP to perceive information in the environment, or a signal. Think of it as a signal broadcast by that apparition, by that ghost, how they think of themselves. If it was visual, physically visual, number one, we'd have tons of photos of ghosts, which we do not have. And they'd be just as clear as when people actually see the ghost look in 3D. We do not have those. Number two, everybody would see the ghost the same way if it's physically visual. And let's think about this, because you can have 2 people, like a psychic and a medium, or just even a witness, in a room full of people, and they're the only ones who see the ghost. How can they be physically seeing the ghost with their eyes? Because the ghost is not reflecting light or giving off light. So we're talking about a psychic phenomena, something either telepathic or clairvoyant, however you want to put it there as well. All right, so let's see. um, yeah, abdominal. There's a lot of breathing techniques that are possible there. So Brian is saying, do you think there are conscious energies at Alcatraz in addition to hauntings? Um, so here's the thing. I know Annette Martin picked up on a guy who died at Alcatraz in the laundry area outside the main prison years ago, and even got a name. And it took a while, but one of the park folks was able to track down the person who fit the manner of death, which was an internal issue. It had nothing to do with like being knifed or anything like that specifically. So there was that. There have been a couple of guards that have been seen that seem to be interactive. But I want you to think about this. None of the good psychics who've been to Alcatraz have been able to pick up on actual conscious beings within the prison, certainly not the prisoners. All right. Even the guy who Annette picked up on, he wanted people to know that he existed, and then he moved on apparently, but he was outside the prison. Um, if you were a prisoner in a prison and everything you wanted to do was to get the hell out of that prison, why would you stay after death? I mean, what is the purpose? What is your own particular reason to stick around in a place that you hated, that you wanted to leave the entire time you were there? Now, maybe some of the guards are sticking around. We haven't heard of that about that, but there's really not a reason for someone to stick around. Plus, people have talked about the Birdman of Alcatraz. If you've seen that movie, he was a very famous prisoner that was there. That the spot where he was kept, he was a psychopath. And he was drawing pictures of birds. He studied ornithology. That area feels really bad. I'll be very honest, feels very unstable, the whole thing. He's not there. He didn't even die there. He was moved to Leavenworth. That's where he died. So why would he come back to Alcatraz? So things like that. We have to kind of consider that. All right. If you were murdered, quick, unexpected, some people, well, here's an interesting thing that most of the children who remember previous lives, the person, we have solved cases, in other words, cases where you could track down who that was, that from based on the memory of the information the child has, they were people who died suddenly in tragic deaths, accidents, murder, suicide, things like that. They died very suddenly. We don't find a lot of people who are murdered sticking around. Unless they're there to try to help solve their own murder, which is pretty rare. But we don't find that. That's not in the record. That's not in the reports that we get. And we can go back over thousands of reports total, going back to the early days of the Society for Psychical Research, for that matter. It may be that some of the people who are in denial that they're dead, the ghosts who are saying they might have died that way. But we don't see a common pattern to murders and things like in the movies. You don't find that typically as well. All right. And I'm just going to comment on your Kundalini experience. That's an energetic experience. People have different types of experiences energetically, and that can make them more psychic or less psychic, can generate other kinds of experiences as well. All right. I think there are a lot of movies where people, again, pop culture has given us a lot of stories. And actually, the modern ghost story goes back to Charles Dickens. And I'm not even talking about A Christmas Carol. He wrote other ghost stories. He was a member of the London Ghost Club, actually. And he kind of set the pattern for a lot of the more modern ghost stories. We have a lot of Western folklore about ghosts that, like the cold spots and things like that, like people being cursed to roam the earth until something is found out about who they were, or something secret was found, or some unfinished business. We don't really find that. In reality, that's just not the way things work. Typically, the only unfinished business tends to be with family, just making sure that everybody's okay, or it could be also possessiveness about the home, making sure the next people who move in are good people who are going to treat the house well, things like that. Okay, Liz, you're mentioning an egregore, also known as a thought form, um, or a tulpa in Tibetan tradition. The idea that if you put enough belief into something, this is the Tibetan tradition, that you cause an image to appear that may eventually take on a life of its own. In other words, become conscious. Um, that's we there have been papers written in the field about thought forms and whether this is possible. We don't know. We really don't know. One of the things that's kind of interesting, going back to Paul asking about UFOs, is that Carl Jung believed that many flying saucers that we're seeing were actually thought forms, were psychic projections. And J. Allen Hynek didn't rule that out as a UFO expert, the guy who dealt with Project Blue Book. So we may be able to create imagery that projects to other people. I've certainly seen cases. I had a case early in my career where psychologically, one person in the case, a poltergeist case, which was caused by the unconscious mind of a living person, no spirits present, but this woman was, for various reasons, was seeing a figure of a black knight, a man in black armor, which is a very Jungian archetype. And it related to something psychological in the situation. And one of her daughters actually saw the same thing at one point. So we think what we looked at was whether or not she was projecting something that the other daughter picked up, but it didn't act independently, and it barely came up a few times. It came up once or twice. That was about it. Paul saying, yeah, Santa. If there were egregores, that Santa would probably be one of the first ones we'd see, but so would the devil, for that matter. Paul, you think it's interesting if people who are cryogenically frozen revived to see what they remember while frozen, if anything? Well, that's a good question, because if they can be revived from being cryogenically frozen, if the brain state is frozen, are they dead? That's a question. Are they dead? Does their spirit move on, and does it come back if they're revived? Or is there something else going on? Is their consciousness still, it's like in stasis? Good question. Good. We have no idea about that. All right. So let's see. We've got that about 10 minutes left. Mike, if you want to just throw up those documents again, that list here. So I mentioned at the very beginning of the session that I have a list that I've used for the media for years. And it's a list of topics which you can form questions from. There's page one. It's a little hard to read perhaps, but I'm happy to send it to folks. I have 2 pages of kind of a brainstorm with some people. We put together a list of topics. This is something I use with media when they say, we don't want to necessarily have a bunch of questions, but is there anything you want to talk about? I can send them this, and I can say, pick anything that's of interest to you off the list, and we can kind of riff off that. So this is the brainstorm list. Again, it's askprofparanormal@gmail.com. You'll find my email listed in the details on the Ask Professor Paranormal page as well. So keep it going here. All right. And let me see what else we got here. All right, asking, have I had any luck with dowsing? I haven't really done dowsing much. I mean, other than, using pendulum for that, but I've tried like doing map dowsing for remote viewing, things like that. I haven't had a lot of success with that. Dowsing itself is really about finding things, really mainly finding mineral and water in the earth, like water witching as they call it, finding minerals, finding oil deposits. People have had a lot of success with that, whether it's using actual dowsing rods or doing map dowsing, which is technically remote viewing more than anything else. But for a communication process, the one thing I have to say is that You are moving the dowsing rods unconsciously. So that is something to remember. When I see ghost hunters actually using dowsing rods and communicate with spirits, and they get excited because the spirits are moving the dowsing rods, the spirits are not moving the dowsing rods. You are the people holding the dowsing rods are unconsciously moving the dowsing rods. Whether a spirit is communicating through your unconscious is a separate question. The only way we would know if a spirit was potentially moving the dowsing rods if the dowsing rods were in holders, not a human's hands. And even then, it could be us that's using psychokinesis to move them. So this is kind of like using a Ouija board. Dowsing rods are no different than using a Ouija board. I know that's a controversial statement, but you are asking for communication. So if you're a one person on the Ouija board, you are unconsciously moving it around, and perhaps there's communication coming through your unconscious for that. All right. So it's not much different, except that it's like texting. Very primitive form of spirit texting. Paul, I think it'd be interesting to see if people are cryogenically for. Okay, I think it kind of repeated itself here a little bit. Mew, thank you to all parapsychologists for doing these important work. You're a fan of mainstream science. You always know and felt so incomplete. There's a lot about mainstream science. There's so much bias in mainstream science, even within fields, even within a single field. Psychologists across the board don't agree with each other. There are many schools of psychological thought. There are string field theorists who don't agree with other physicists who are theorists. There's all sorts of stuff that in mainstream, and really that's important. Fact is, we should be studying all sorts of human experiences without labeling them. And unfortunately, that's not happening. Parapsychology has been studying consciousness-related stuff for a long time. We'd like other people from other fields to come and join us, but there is a bias that's there. All right. During your investigations, have you ever really been spooked? Not by a ghost. I've had some really interesting experiences. Been walked through a bunch of times. Felt pretty good, actually. I got to tell you, it was a ghost that I've been investigating the place for a long time, so that was not a problem. I've had some really funny things happen, but it's only been, unfortunately, living people who have spooked me. So let's see. Maybe we couldn't bring yourself to the paranormal because thought it was all just tarot readers and scary ghosts, Fact is that there's that pop culture thing, and also misrepresentation by the skeptics, the so-called skeptics, and misrepresentation by ghost hunters. All of that, and mainly the TV media. Again, we're going back to media. Media, pop culture has misrepresented this stuff for a long time. Stephen, you want to talk to more psychics after having spoken to Victoria Laurie, who is great. Again, Victoria Laurie, I think, is a great psychic. If for those of you who might want a really cool reading, Victoria is the one to go to. And again, read her novels because they're based on her own experiences to some extent. Her psychic eye books are great. She had one that just came out about a month or so ago, and I always eat them up. Love her stuff. Who else do you recommend? It depends on whether you're looking. These days, I know mostly mediums rather than psychics, but I have a couple of folks like my friend Ankasha Amenti. It's Ankasha, ANKHASHA.com. She's a really good psychic. I've known her for many, many years. She's also a good medium. She does both psychic readings and mediumistic stuff too. So she's another recommendation I have. Otherwise, you'll have to email me and I can see who else I can dig up, literally. Okay. Graveyard Grog. You don't recommend eating books, especially e-books. I don't know about that. Sometimes they're pretty tasty intellectually. So, but thank you for that. All right, so we're coming down to the wire. We just got a few minutes left, about 4 minutes left. You're very welcome, Paul. If I just want you, for those of you who are here, feel free to, think about questions you can ask me next time. You can even email them to me if you want in advance. Just say, we want you to talk about this next time, or I can just respond to you. Again, ask for that topics list. Also, for anybody interested in running a spoon bending party, send me an email. Ask for the spoon bending piece as well. I'm going to put my email address in the chat here. This is the one connected to the show. You can also just leave off the ask and just send an email to profparanormal@gmail.com. It's another way to get to me as well. I'm still on Twitter, but I'm now also on Threads. And I think I'm on Tribal Social as well. Haven't really done much there yet. All right. How often? So I do these live streams now. It's going to be every other Sunday night going forward. We did skip 3 weeks this past time because I was traveling. But typically, I'll be doing every other week. In fact, realigning this made it a lot easier for some things coming up in the fall. And they're at the same time. You can find the past sessions here are recorded and saved here on the YouTube channel. And there are some also on my Facebook page, my author page, which is lloyd.auerbach.author. And essentially, they're going to be happening. So next one is going to be August 6th and then August 20th. Those are the next two that we've actually got. I am not on TikTok. I mean, I'm on TikTok, but I don't do TikToks at this point. I only have so much time for social media, unfortunately, because I'm way too busy otherwise. And frankly, maybe I will start doing TikTok because then I don't have to type. I'm really fast typing, like on my keyboard for my computer. I can write really fast, but I am really bad at texting. I'm not quite sure why that translates, but so I have tried to avoid texting also. I'm not really good at that. Certainly not long texts. All right. All right, the show, Graveyard Grog, a show of breath of fresh air in a field that is drenched in Hollywood and TV celebs. Yeah, you're very welcome. I also have, for those of you who don't know, I grew up in the television industry, father, uncle, and TV. Actually, one uncle was also in radio, was a radio newscaster. My first TV appearance was when I was 6 months old, just because I was a time filler. A show that my dad was working at the time was the stage manager on, but he was director and mainly a producer. One of my uncles was a director for soap operas, and my other uncle was a radio newscaster. So, and one of my brothers now works for the Today Show and has been for years. Another one cuts movie trailers. He has a company that does movie trailers. So I'm in and around the media, behind the scenes, all my life. So, and that's all on top of all the TV that I've done myself. All right, so I think we're finishing up. I'll just kind of close out here, and hope that you all come back. Tell your friends if they have any interest in the paranormal. Do subscribe so that you get notices when we're doing things. It's possible I might be doing some special things too, lectures and things like that from time to time. So I just have to work this out and see what we're going to do. But please tune in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, have a great 2 weeks. Definitely hit like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Good night.